Now this week, as world leaders gather to hammer out a deal on climate change, we ask if green taxes will cost more jobs or actually create them in the northeastern Cumbria. And we have a Green Party leader, Natalie Bennett, here in the studio with us, along with Sunderland Labour MP Julie Elliott and UKIP Euro MP for the North East, Jonathan Arnott. Welcome to you all. And the North Labour MPs were divided over bombing Syria, and some, including one Wearside MP, received a volley of online abuse for backing action. So how deep do the divisions in the party go? We'll be taking a look. But we start with the first electoral test for Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Hello and the warmest of welcomes to your local part of the show. Now this week, as world leaders gather to hammer out a deal on climate change, we ask if green taxes will cost more jobs or actually create them in the northeastern Cumbria. And we have a Green Party leader, Natalie Bennett, here in the studio with us, along with Sunderland Labour MP Julie Elliott and UKIP Euro MP for the North East, Jonathan Arnott. Welcome to you all. And the North Labour MPs were divided over bombing Syria, and some, including one Wearside MP, received a volley of online abuse for backing action. So how deep do the divisions in the party go? We'll be taking a look. But we start with the first electoral test for Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. The Oldham by-election, which Labour retained with an increased share of the vote. A blow to UKIP, of course, who hoped they might take the seat, or at least push Labour closer. But does it tell us anything about the voters' wider attitude towards the Labour Party? I suppose that's the key question, Julia. Good result, no doubt about that.
Brilliant result.
But you can't learn much about the party's wider chances just from a safe seat, can you?
No, I mean, by-elections are by-elections, and there's no such thing as a safe seat in a by-election. But what we did have yesterday was an exceptional local candidate who was very well known against the backdrop of a government who were hitting working people very hard.
Given that a lot of people were expecting this to be a damning verdict on Jeremy Corbyn, does it show he's doing a good job as leader? I
don't think a by-election is about the leader. I think it's about local issues and the local campaign. That's certainly our experience in the North East when we've had by-elections, and we did brilliantly well.
OK, all right. Jonathan Arnott, let's be honest, it was a terrible result for UKIP, given your expectations, how much you talked up your chances. And actually, not only a bad result, but actually been bad losers over this. Complaining about the system, saying it was fiddled.
Look, I certainly think there are a lot of things that we're going to look back at and say we can learn from that by-election. If you'd asked me the same question a month ago, how are we going to do, the thought that when everyone was telling us UKIP had finished after the general election, that would actually increase our share of the vote to almost 24%, at that time, I'd have snatched your hands off. But we did make a few mistakes. Certainly our expectation management wasn't right. We talked things up, and I think as well that the media were hyping it up. You know, you see a lot of journalists were put. Look, there was a 10,000 majority at the end of the day. Now, there will be questions that do need to be asked with regard to that, but that's not affecting the overall result. Labour were going to win. Labour deserved to win in terms of their get out of the vote operation compared with ours. There are a lot of things that we actually need to learn from that. OK, all right. Natalie Bennett, 1% the Green Party polled. Not a great result. Is there anywhere, do you think, in the North Eastern Cumbria you could win a by-election if there was one?
Well, I think by-elections are by their nature innately unpredictable. What we're certainly looking towards is the council elections right across the region next May, and we're looking to win our first councillors on a number of councils from South Shields to Sunderland to Newcastle, more broadly around the region. We're focused on local politics, that's where we start, so we're focused on those elections.
Possibly not then, right, OK, all right. That's maybe an unfair summary, but anyway, let's move on to something else. And 150 world leaders are in Paris for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Any deal they reach on cutting greenhouse gas emissions will, of course, potentially be good for the planet, according to many most scientists, in fact. But for those working in energy-intensive and polluting industries, it may not be so welcome. Taxes on carbon emissions have already been blamed for job losses in the northeastern Cumbria and for the demise of the steel industry. But green energy is creating jobs too, as Fergus Hewson reports.
Hundreds of people on the streets of Newcastle marching to protect the planet, in part from the effects of burning fossil fuels.
I feel very strongly about climate change because two of my grandchildren are here. By the time they're my age, who knows what the climate's going to be like?
The decisions need to be made now to stop us having major problems 20th when my kids are my age, you know what I mean?
But bringing an end to our devotion to fuels that produce greenhouse gases can come at a high price. This year, more than 2,000 jobs went to the SSI steelworks on Teesside, plus many thousands of others in the supply chain. 500 jobs were lost at Alcan in Northumberland in 2012. In each case, the high cost of energy and so-called green taxes was cited as a factor in the closure of the plants. Brian Dennis worked at the SSI Steelworks and its predecessor companies for 26 years. He feels green policies contributed to him losing his job.
Our energy here, due to green taxation, every £30 of £80 per megawatt hour is a taxation. It's over twice what we pay in Europe, and it's a lot less than what we have in the rest of the world. We just didn't have a level playing field.
But as jobs in energy-intensive industries have gone, has the drive for renewable energy begun to replace some of those jobs lost? It's estimated at least 6,000 jobs in the northeast are dependent on the offshore renewable energy sector alone. And as the drive to exploit renewable energy sources goes on, other green jobs are also being created. These trees in Northumberland end up as wood chips, which make their way to a biomass boiler on a nearby estate.
It's in here, yep. So, you can crack this open and take a look inside so you can see right inside the heart of the boiler.
And that's burning all the wood chips
so
which are being pushed into the boiler.
Yeah, so that's locally sourced from within just a few miles. Here, sustainably heating the properties this boiler is connected to.
Neil Harrison's business is benefiting from the move towards renewable energy, and he thinks that there's great potential for new jobs within his industry.
Biomass systems and wood-fired systems in particular are one of the best job creators of all the renewable energy technologies because they rely on a constant supply chain. They rely on somebody to manage the woodlands, somebody to harvest the timber, somebody to haul the timber, to chip the timber, to place into these boilers, to burn, to produce low carbon energy. And obviously because it's part of a sustainable forestry system, there are then jobs required to replant those forests that are felled on a commercial basis.
The government says it's committed to meeting environmental targets and reducing the use of fossil fuels. However, it's just dropped plans to invest in carbon capture and storage and has recently reduced subsidies for green energy generation. Being green can come with a cost, but doing nothing may cost us even dearer.
Fergus Houston reporting. Natalie Bennett, I mean, steelworkers in Teesside, the people who lost their jobs in Alcan a few years ago in Northumberland, they look at the kind of green policies you support, and what they conclude is, correctly, that whatever the merits of them, they are costing them their jobs.
Well, I think that's demonstrably not true. The main issue in the steel industry has been very cheap Chinese steel probably being dumped into Europe. But I think, first of all, I'd like to say, absolute sympathy to those people and to the communities which have suffered blow after blow from deindustrialisation, from loss of good jobs. But what we need to do, and as that film suggested, renewable energy, energy conservation has enormous potential. I've today been visiting AIS training, a company in North Shields that's doing great work preparing people to work on offshore wind. I was visiting a solar energy installer who has been powering ahead, in 4 years become a multi-million pound turnover business, but of course has been really knocked back and left with a real state of uncertainty in terms of with the government's cuts to the feed-in tariff, plus renewable heat initiatives. So we have a problem. Renewable hasn't powered ahead the way it might have done because of uncertainty about government policy.
Do we have to accept then, in your view, that energy-intensive industries like steel are going to shed jobs because that is what the price we need to pay to tackle climate change?
No, I don't accept that because we still need steel. You think about in terms of offshore wind turbines, then obviously they need steel in their structure.
But you wouldn't lift these green levies on the steel industry, would you, as the government is going to do?
But what we need to be doing is actually investing, supporting research. The European Union has an ultra-low carbon steel program. Now that's talking about not the content of the steel, but the emissions from the production of the steel. What we should be doing is investing in both government and really encouraging industry to invest. To produce, if we produce the lowest carbon, most efficient steel in the world, then there's a real market for that kind of steel.
In the meantime, this is what people, I suppose, say is the flaw in some of your thinking, is that, while we punish industry in this country, China carries on making steel and carries on polluting. This is the problem, isn't it? It's no point taking action in this country or in Europe as a whole if we can't get global agreements. Well,
I expect we're going to have a global agreement coming out of Paris, and one of the exciting things is that the position of China has changed enormously compared to recent global climate talks. China, 48% of their new electricity generation last year was renewables. China actually has to deal with its air pollution problem. It's getting a great deal of pressure from the bottom up to do that. China is actually one of the driving forces to getting an agreement in these talks. It's in a very different position.
Do you think genuinely that renewable energy can generate the number of jobs, 2,000 that we saw lost in the steel industry, to kind of take up the slack?
Very much so. I mean, you think about the potential in terms of solar. If we had maintained the zero carbon home standard that this government killed when it was going to come in next year, we'd be seeing solar panels on virtually all new homes' roofs. If you think about what we need to do, which is insulate every home that needs it, the Energy Bill Revolution's a proposal for doing that. Treat homes as our national infrastructure. Okay. That would create on its own 100,000 jobs around the country.
All right, we'll come back to you. Jonathan Arnott, I mean, there are painful changes in the economy, but Natalie Bennett is right. We need to tackle climate change, but also see the opportunity in that for creating jobs.
Look, two things that you've got to remember. Firstly, green jobs are still jobs. So when you create those additional jobs, if it's actually putting people's energy bills up, then it's costing jobs at the same time back in the real world. So however you generate your power, you are creating jobs. Where I do have a certain sympathy with what Natalie's saying, actually, is where she's saying that, that the situation with SSI was not just solely down to energy prices. There are a lot of other factors.
Energy prices,
yeah, energy. I mean, steel is. There's no two ways about it. Steel is one of the most energy-intensive industries there is, and it's certainly a factor in the closure. But there are a whole lot of other factors, from Chinese dumping, the high pound, the high cost of raw materials. The problems with state aid.
Your party would remove a lot of these green levies policies. I mean, Nigel Farage is no believer in climate change, is he? In fact, almost the opposite, isn't he?
Well, you just got to look at what you saw in the film. That biomass example. I visited, for example, Egger in Northumberland, where they built their own biomass plant with no subsidy.
Well, they were using byproducts. Your leader isn't, is he?
Let me finish my point. They were using byproducts, recycled wood. And then when you bring in the subsidies, you see something like that, where they're chopping trees down to be used. That's not an efficient way of doing it. The inefficiency has come because of the subsidy. Look, what we've got to do is get the right renewables, and we've got to make sure that we make them cost-effective first and then introduce them. Not the other way around, as we're doing at the moment. That's why we've got so many problems. Okay. We've got to invest in the right research.
OK. Julie Elliott, do you think we need to strip away a lot of these green taxes to save industries that, are struggling, like the steel industry, or by doing that are we just increasing the damage to the planet?
Well, I mean, the green taxes argument is a complete smokescreen, and I said this in the chamber when we discussed this a few weeks ago in the debate on the steel industry. There is no question that the energy market in the UK is not good at the moment. This government have a ridiculous policy on energy, and certainly on green energy. The carbon floor price that this government brought in, an entirely revenue-raising tax, which didn't help the steel industry. But to say that that is the cause of the plant closing is nonsense. It's quite right that it was the Chinese steel being dumped, and also the government's inaction. The government knew this was coming down the line 8 or 9 months ago and did nothing about it.
The government are here to defend it, but I just want to state...
Can I just pick up something that Jonathan said, because he was saying about the cost in household bills. The average dual fuel bill for a household is £1,356. The average cost in that of green subsidies is £46. That's the annual cost. If the government had kept the solar feed-in tariffs that it's now proposing to cut, the cost by 2020-21, at the end of the Parliament, would be £6 a year per bill.
And all the jobs that have been lost by the cut in feed-in tariffs as well. There's many, many thousands of jobs being lost across the country.
But you can't get away scot-free. It was the Labour Party that introduced a lot of the green energy levies, etc. That a lot of industry is certainly blaming for costing jobs, and also a lot of people think has put consumer bills up as well.
Well, it's 7% of the average consumer bill is the green levies. But at the same time...
That's a lot for people who are struggling.
At the same time, Richard, when we were in government, we had energy efficiency schemes for homes to bring people's bills down. We had policies to reimburse the poorest of families.
While you were in government? They went up and up, didn't they?
No, they were the lowest increases in the last 3 years while we had these things going on. When we created the Energy and Climate Change Department, we took it seriously, and we have got to decarbonise our energy supply. That is a reality. That's what the talks are about this week. We can't just sit back and say climate change isn't happening. So it's balancing the cost of living problems that people have in paying bills whilst cleaning up our energy supply.
And just one point also, what's often forgotten is that fossil fuels are enormously subsidised. Subsidies to fossil fuels cost each person in Britain £400 per year. Those are IMF figures.
OK. The problem for the Green Party again here is that you have lost some of the arguments, haven't you? I mean, people in Northumberland, in Cumbria, in County Durham, who were besieged by applications for onshore wind turbines, they're absolutely delighted the government has effectively said that's enough in terms of onshore wind.
I don't think we've lost the arguments at all, because I think what people in Britain are increasingly recognising is that the rest of the world is powering ahead with renewable energy and we're being left behind.
But those communities do not want to see more wind turbines.
Well, I think one of the things we'd very much like to see, and again something these government policies have done great damage to, is community-owned energy. And rather than having big multinational companies coming in and telling communities we're going to put a wind farm there, let's actually encourage, support community energy. And the community can say, we want to actually develop our own energy. Okay. Where will we put the wind farm? Where will it look like? And then it will be their wind farm, and it looks like and feels like a different kind of project.
Very briefly, but in West Cumbria, a community desperate to see a nuclear power station there, think it will create jobs. Green Party wouldn't have any nuclear power stations.
Nuclear power, waste and the issues of security are obvious, but it's immensely expensive. A 20th century dinosaur. Renewables is the way forward. Renewable will create far more jobs. Okay. Decentralised energy, community-owned energy.
OK, we'll have to leave it there. Now, the impact of the vote to bomb Syria is still rippling through the Labour Party this weekend. Many rank and file remain unhappy with those MPs, 8 of them in our region, who voted in favour of military action. In some cases, that dissatisfaction spilled over into outright abuse on social media. So how serious are the divisions within the party? Disharmony, dispute and division. And that was just within the Labour Party. Wednesday's debate saw a split in the party's MPs in our region. While 20 backed Jeremy Corbyn in opposing Syrian airstrikes, 8 voted with the government. And so came raids and recriminations. Labour MPs who voted to back action said they faced intimidation and abuse before and after the vote. One person on social media even wished harm on Wearside MP Bridget Phillipson's newborn baby. Some say Jeremy Corbyn should have done more to stop it.
I think he should have acted earlier. I think he needs to be much more specific and firm. I think we need to see some action taken against people who are engaging in this kind of behaviour. I think in particular when the leader of the Labour Party goes onto national media to say that there will be, quote, no hiding place for members of Parliament with regard to a decision of conscience on extending our operations into Syria, I think that raises profound questions, and I think we haven't heard the last of that.
But anti-war activists take a different view. Kate Dove is a Labour member in Gateshead and backed Jeremy Corbyn for the leadership. Tony Dowling chairs Newcastle's Stop the War coalition. They condemn abuse, but say MPs who backed action need to know how disappointed they are.
It's quite staggering, actually, this nonsense that people are coming out with, talking about bullying for being called a warmonger. I mean, if you can't put up with the cut and thrust of a bit of robust debate and discussion, bullying's a big word, and I don't think it's the right word to be using in this context.
59.5% of Labour membership, whether that be MPs, councillors, or just normal grassroots members, all these registered supporters, they voted for Jeremy Corbyn, and he is now the leader, and we'll have to listen to what he has to say, and he's been elected leader for a reason. And if they don't listen to that, then they're not being representative.
There will then be more protests like this one in Newcastle, often involving Labour members. But Conservatives just see a divided and weak opposition.
In a democracy, we need a good opposition that can hold the government to account, that is an alternative government. I do not believe we have that at this moment in time. On such an issue of sending the military in to take military action, quite clearly the government has to have a view. It has, and it's taken its MPs with it. You would expect the opposition to have a similar position. The fact that they had a free vote, I think, says it all about the position of the Labour Party at present. They are in complete disarray. I do not think this is healthy for British politics.
Nobody can be certain what the outcome of military action in Syria will be. But one thing it has achieved is to highlight the deep divides within the Labour Party. Well, let's talk to one Labour MP who did vote against airstrikes, Julie Elliott. Did you feel intimidated and bullied into that position?
Well, I'm not the type of person to be bullied. I think some of the emails and some of the Twitter feed I had was not helpful in making the decision. I think it certainly put pressure on a lot of people who perhaps aren't as old and long in the tooth as me and can just take no notice of it. It wasn't done in a friendly or comradely style at all.
But people are entitled, aren't they, to express strong opinions on something so fundamental that could cost lives.
I encourage people to email me and tell me what they think, but I think some of it did go beyond the mark. And certainly, I mean, my colleague Bridget was mentioned there. I travelled back from London yesterday with Bridget, and some of the things that were going online for her were really unacceptable.
As Jamie Reid suggests, has the leadership of the party taken it seriously enough and acted quickly enough on it?
On Syria?
Oh, no, on that abuse.
Oh, I mean, I'm delighted that both the leader and the deputy leader wrote to all members yesterday explaining that it was unacceptable. I think perhaps it should have come earlier, but I think it reached a new level after the vote, quite honestly, and they did act very quickly after that.
I gained the impression that Jamie Reid, I know he's put a complaint into Labour's chief whip, felt that perhaps Jeremy Corbyn was guilty of perhaps inviting, maybe inadvertently, some of this by suggesting there was no hiding place for MPs.
Well, I didn't actually see Jeremy say that. I'm not saying Jamie is telling lies. I'm sure he did say it, but I didn't see it. I didn't feel that. I just felt that it was... I was happy to have people write to me and contact me explaining, you know, the issues. Jeremy decided we were having a free vote, so that's where Jeremy was, and I think that was the right decision, because anybody who's a member of Parliament thinks about these things very, very carefully, and at the end of the day you have to take into account the facts of the issue as we know them, what people that you consult with are saying, and also what your own conscience says and how you can live with the decision you make.
And I think the question really should be, for Tory MPs, you know, do you feel comfortable going back to your constituents and saying, I voted for a war because the whip told me to? I think issues of war and peace very clearly should be free votes.
OK, I'm sure a lot of those Conservative MPs said they did it because they believe it's the right thing to do. But Jonathan Arnott, here's the reaction of your councillor in Allerdale, parliamentary candidate in Workington, on social media. Directed at the Prime Minister, you bloodthirsty, and some strong language here, warmongering bastard. This will be your 45 minutes moment. Is that your view?
No, that is not how anyone who's a former parliamentary candidate should be talking. When I was General Secretary of the party, obviously, I took a very, very dim view indeed when our candidates and activists acted in a particular way.
Opinion,
so
perhaps,
no, but that's not the sort of language that you should be using in expressing it. So no, I don't hold with that. But look, this sort of thing should be a free vote. And the reason that I say that is because it is fundamentally a matter of conscience. The problem that the Labour Party has had is that Jeremy Corbyn, back in 2013, insisted that these matters must be a free vote when he was a backbench MP. Then when he became Labour leader, he starts saying something different, and then he goes back in the end to the free vote because he's been forced into it by the shadow cabinet.
Isn't the point that you know, your party looks confused? Nigel Farage is against these airstrikes. Your one MP in Parliament votes for them.
Exactly, as I said, it should be a free vote. It should be a matter of conscience. And Douglas Carswell sat in that debate. He listened to everything that was said on both sides, and he made his decision at the end of the debate, having considered it and thought it through. Now, I might not have made the same decision as he did, but that is a perfectly reasonable and rational way to do things.
Natalie Bennett, you don't want outright personal abuse, but do some Labour MPs need to get thicker skins when they have, see this lobbying, someone would say, online?
Well, I think very clearly, personal abuse and threats, it's something I would very much hope that the police are investigating. But I think we do have to understand we're in a new age of politics, a different age of politics, multi-party politics. Things are different, and that means debate needs to be conducted. And social media is where debate is being conducted. That's part of the new politics.
Well, but
we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid.
Debate.
OK, we'll have to leave it there, I'm afraid. That is about it from us. It's